Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, bringing you up to speed on SFDR and the EU Taxonomy. I'm here with your regular host, Samuel Baumgartner, and of course, our ESG expert and returning speaker, Mette Kjær. She's here to help you sort out the puzzle that is the SFDR and the EU Taxonomy. Hopefully she can do it. A little housekeeping before we start. Remember that everyone's muted, so if you have a question, just type it into the chat, and we will get to it at the end during the Q&A. And a little bit about responsibility. We are a sustainable investment house that specializes in impact investing in emerging markets. We invest in financial inclusion, such as fintech and microfinance, and also sustainable food and agriculture across the entire value chain. And of course, climate finance, from green lending to commercial and industrial solar. All right, I will hand over now to Samuel and Mette, and I will come back at the end for the Q&A. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Stacey, for the introduction. A very, very warm welcome to the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on the time zone you're in. A very warm welcome also from my side to you, Mette. It's great to have you back.
It's great to be back. Thanks.
Last October, you helped us to take a look at the EU taxonomy and how it fits into the broader EU sustainability strategy. I think to kick it off, I would like to ask or to know from you and also for the audience, starting with the short poll question, actually, to know whether or not they would invest in an Article 8 fund. And I think while we're doing that, Mette, could you give us a short review of the EU taxonomy and the SFDR while we're waiting for the results to come in?
I'm happy to do so. So first of all, I wanted to mention that the EU has developed the EU Action Plan on Sustainable Finance in order to avoid greenwashing in the financial sector and also in order to reach the EU target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And so in order to reach this target, they have developed different pieces of regulation, where two of the most comprehensive ones are the EU Taxonomy and the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. In brief, the EU Taxonomy is a classification tool that outlines which economic activities that can be defined as environmentally sustainable. And under the SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, financial market participants must disclose how they deal with sustainability and sustainability risks and how they assess such assessments in their investment process. And so the disclosure is required both on entity level and at product level. And the product level disclosure must also include a product classification.
Very good. Let's see what the audience is telling us. Interesting, there's quite a number that is looking into Article 9, but we also have quite a bit of question marks. So we will definitely be looking in this webinar, looking into answering or trying our best to answer these question marks. Are you surprised to see quite a substantial number of participants looking into Article 9, Mette?
I'm not so surprised about this, since Article 9 is really the most comprehensive article when it comes to sustainability. So I'm happy to also see that many have answered Article 9 and also 8. But in order to address the question of Article what, let me try to explain you what the different products are. So first of all, Article 8 products, those are products that promote environmental and social characteristics, but do not necessarily have them as an overarching objectives. And so this could, for instance, be funds with an exclusion list in place, or maybe even an ESG rating framework in place. These products are also in common language called light green products. And then Article 9 products, those are products that have a sustainable investment objective, meaning that these investments are contributing to an environmental or social objectives. And these specific objectives, they must be measured by performance indicators, and funds that are Article 9 are obliged to disclose against also the taxonomy. And so these products are in common language called dark green funds. An example of this is that all responsibilities funds are classified as Article 9 funds, as we have a sustainable investment objective for all our funds and can measure it with KPIs.
So I'm curious. We've seen also in the poll that there's a number that's looking into Article 9 and Article 8. How does this reflect in the fund universe or in the investment universe? What's the percentage of investment solutions so far classified as Article 8 and Article 9?
Yeah, this is very interesting to look into. So according to a market assessment done by Morningstar, which covers 52% of all European funds, only 2.7% of the European funds have classified as Article 9 funds. And when it comes to Article 8 products, it's 20.9%. And so this means that the regulation can actually help differentiating and also identifying those funds that are truly sustainable. I would say it also shows that there are now actually a distinction on funds that are truly contributing to a sustainable objective and funds that are mainly doing ESG rating, where the overarching objective is maybe something else than sustainability.
Okay, I mean we do see a general shift also on the regulatory landscape. We've seen some landmark court cases. One example is a group of teenagers together with an elder lady in Australia successfully blocked the expansion of a coal main under the basis that the government has the obligation to protect young people against future harm of climate change. On the investment side, what in your opinion can happen, or what do investors need to do to drive more solutions towards Article 8 and predominantly Article 9?
Yeah, I would say a thing that can be done to really increase the level of Article 9 funds is, as an investor, to really vote with your money. And so with this, showing where you would rather invest or put your money, for instance, in sustainable products, the demand of these sustainable products will go up, meaning also the offering of sustainable products will hopefully also increase. And actually, this is backed up by another regulation which is on its way, which is the amendments to existing MiFID regulation, where investors and also advisors, they will be required to offer or recommend products based on investors' sustainability preferences. So if an investor expresses her or his preferences in sustainable products, such products should then also be offered by the investment manager.
So voting with our money is definitely one of the ways to go forward. Moving on, I would like to dive a bit deeper into what it actually means to be an Article 9 investment solution, for example. You mentioned before that responsibilities investment solutions all fall under Article 9. What did we have to do to comply? In the end, we are an impact investment house. What was the process? What was the necessary steps there?
Yeah, so in terms of process, I would say, as we have already for many years been working with sustainable investments via our impact investments in emerging markets, we already had most of the framework in place in order to directly comply with the SFDR. This is, for instance, the historic collection of KPIs to measure our investment objective. So until now, what we mainly had to do was working on the format, rewrite, of course, some aspects to align it with the SFDR requirements, and yeah, do the actual disclosure. Of course, there are challenges on the way, and there'll definitely also be challenges coming up now, also with the applicances of further regulations.
You mentioned that rewriting some of the processes. What are some of the other challenges that we saw to become compliant?
Yeah, actually, the main challenges we have with complying with these regulations is related to EU Taxonomy and then also the so-called principal adverse sustainability indicators. First of all, the EU Taxonomy, I mean, it's rather strict, which is of course very good. It's how it should be. I'm definitely a supporter of the taxonomy, but as it is this strict, it is also difficult to apply for particularly emerging markets. I can maybe try to provide you with an example of this. So the EU Taxonomy does currently, via the criteria that are outlined in the Do No Significant Harm section, require compliance with specific EU legislation. And this could, for instance, be the EU Water Framework Directive. And yeah, obviously these regulations are not applicable for our investment universe, which means that we then have to identify what it then takes to comply with these do no significant harm criteria. And so therefore the EU taxonomy gives us an extra burden in terms of workload, first of collecting the data, then make quality checks against any applicable regulations in the investment country, and then see if it's consistent with EU regulation, and then in the end disclosed against the taxonomy. So it's quite challenging, but yeah, it has to be done, and we'll make sure that this is done properly.
For sure. You've mentioned data collection and also comparing these data points. I would also like to dive a little bit deeper into that part of then who does the verification, or their audit processes and so on happening? How is that setup working?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Currently, there are no requirements in place on verification specifically. I mean, many investors, they use third-party data providers to calculate this alignment, and I'm sure that these third-party data providers do their best to verify the indicators, information, and data based on international standards. We in Responsibility, what we do is specifically for the EU taxonomy alignment, we get it verified by external experts on the EU regulation.
Okay, so that whole process sounds immensely complex for somebody who's already been doing impact investing for a while. In your opinion, or from your experience, what does that mean for companies who are new to this setup, that they can't? I understand it's not just pulling a switch from one side to the other.
No, and I would add to this. So, for instance, investors that have maybe previously marketed some of their products as sustainable, but do not specifically target a sustainable objective, they do now maybe struggle to actually show that they are sustainable, especially because from now on, marketing material must be consistent with the EU regulation, which means that they cannot market their products as sustainable if they actually aren't sustainable with the definitions of the EU regulation. It might be, though, that many investors will improve over time, and so we will see how this evolves.
Okay, and I guess this also counts for the audit processes, that there's still quite a long way on processes to be implemented and to be evaluated. Now we've looked a bit at sticking to rules and everything. I was wondering, is there also an enforcement mechanism behind this whole thing, or other question the other way around? What happens if you say you're Article 8 but you're not?
Yeah, so the consequences have not yet been outlined, but this will be more clear when the individual countries have actually adopted the regulation. It will also, I would say, be more clear in the future whether the disclosure will actually require external verification, which is currently not the case. And so probably we can also see an increase in the market development on verification against these applicable regulations.
Okay, so no definite sanctions at the moment.
Not at the moment, but it might come. So it's okay. About to do the right disclosure and also fund classification.
Fair enough. I think given the way it's going, it's likely that we will see something going in that direction. Having now looked at the SFDR and the differences between Article 8 and Article 9, we would like to pull up the next poll and ask the audience, will you be using the SFDR and the EU Taxonomy disclosure information to guide your investment decisions going forward? And in the meanwhile, Mette, maybe you want to quickly summarize the key takeaways that we're looking at from this webinar.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So first of all, what I would like to outline is that since March 10, 2021, so this year, every EU financial market participant needs to comply with the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which is focusing on creating transparent data on sustainability. And from 1st of January next year, the EU Taxonomy on climate change, mitigation and adaptation will also come into force. And so what does this mean for specifically investors? Well, it means that now investors can use the framework to make an investment decision through these newly available transparent data on sustainability. And furthermore, I would say there are also differences between investments falling under different articles. This is specifically Article 8 and 9, where there is a distinction when it comes to the sustainable investment objective. So I would say a key takeaway on this is also have this in mind when you take your investment decision as an investor.
Very good. And I think we have the results coming in. This is, I think, quite interesting. It seems like there's quite a lot of participants here that are considering the SFDR and the EU taxonomy. I think we'll hopefully be able to take advantage of the Q&A round coming up in a moment to still clarify a couple of questions that the participants might have, and maybe convince one or the other of the 7 and 30% to the absolutely part now.
Exactly. No, and I would say this is a good sign. It has been a kind of worry for a long time whether this can actually be used, whether there's even too much data out there in the market. But I would say also with this answer, we can see that there's definitely an interest when it comes to transparency on sustainable investments. And so I think people will also or can take at least the advantage of using this to actually drive their investment decision. Yeah, no, so that's great to see. And of course, when it comes to knowing more about all this, yeah, there will be much more information also coming up in the next many months.
Definitely.
All right.
And I think with
that,
ahead, I would like to go ahead, please, Stacey. With that, I would like to go over to the question and answer.
All right, we've got some questions lining up here. Here's one we definitely have not covered so far. Could you explain the difference between Article 8 and 9 products and Article 6 products?
Yeah, very good question. So Article 6 products, which is in contrast to Article 8 and 9 products, are products that do not deal with sustainability. So they cannot claim that they have an ESG framework or that they have a sustainable investment objective. So if a fund or a product is an Article 6 product, this has to be outlined at the webpage and at product level. That is both on websites and also in prospectus. And so this also creates transparency for investors when they see, okay, this fund, it's clear that this is not contributing to any kind of sustainable objective.
All right, moving on. How is SFDR taking into account the gender parity lens?
Oh, yeah, good question. So this is not directly included only via the fact that, for instance, SFDR requires specifically for Article 9 funds disclosure against the EU taxonomy. The EU taxonomy does outline via its minimum safeguards, kind of minimum standards on what it takes for companies or how companies should react in terms of labor conditions, and social standards. And so here, what is included here is non-discrimination at a policy level. And so indirectly, the EU taxonomy will also make sure that at least these aspects are being taken care of, so that at least there are no negative effects. What I want to add as well on this is that I know that the EU is in the making of a social taxonomy. And so while the requirements are not clear yet when it comes to what is actually included in the social taxonomy, it might be that these gender questions and aspects will be included in a social taxonomy. So if this is a really important aspect for you as an investor, I would recommend you to follow the development of the social taxonomy, as this might become a part of the social taxonomy.
Great. So now, what do you think is the most unclear with the last SDFR RTS draft, and hence the most difficult as an asset manager to deal with?
I could talk for a long time about this. There are many unclear aspects. Maybe I will start with the fact that when it comes to the SFDR regulation, there are two levels. So the level 1 part of the SFDR has already been implemented in March 10 this year. And the level 2, which is the regulatory technical standards, that will become or come into force in January 2022. And so the question is related to, so what are the requirements when it comes to this level 2 regulation or the regulatory technical standards? I would say currently, which I think also other investors are dealing with or facing currently, is when it comes to collection of KPIs or so-called principal adverse sustainability indicators. And so currently it's quite unclear when it comes to the RTS requirements, how, for instance, investors like us, impact investors investing in the private market, how they are to collect this data, for instance. Currently it is the way that there is no external data providers that can help us as impact investors to get this data that must be disclosed in the future. And so here it's very intransparent. What should impact investors do? Is it sufficient to actually collect the data directly from the investee companies? Should it be verified? What happens if we cannot get this data? And so on and so on. So there is a lot of uncertainty here. We will see how it also develops and see how the market gets around this. But that's at least a big uncertainty that I would outline when it comes to the regulatory technical standards.
Perfect. All right. Do you foresee many current funds or investment instruments that stop labeling? Sorry. Do you foresee many current funds, investment instruments that they will stop labeling themselves as sustainable once the SFDR goes into effect?
I would definitely expect that. I would say also with the market assessments that has been done, we can see that it's actually the minority of the funds that are actually labeling themselves as either Article 8 or 9. I would say before this, it was quite easy for many investors or funds to say, yeah, we are sustainable, we do something good, but without having the tools for really showing how sustainable they are. And so before, I would say it was quite easy for many investors to do a bit of greenwashing or at least label or marketing themselves as sustainable. But now with this very specific tool, also very strict tool, it might be difficult for many investors to actually show that they are this sustainable as they said they were before this regulation came into force. So to answer the question, I do expect that it will have a big impact on such investors and that it will distinguish a bit in the investment universe.
And what can we expect on the regulatory front from the Swiss regulators?
Yeah, on the Swiss market side, they are looking into now how to implement this EU regulation. And so what I know of currently, it can change, of course, but that Switzerland would get public with something in October this year. So we will probably see a development that goes in the same direction as the EU regulation on this specific topic, but still unclear exactly how and exactly what it's gonna be. But I'm definitely sure that there will be something quite similar. And so also the recommendation, would be that Swiss investors also look into this if they haven't already.
Good. Now, what is the necessary extra data that needs to be collected to comply with the new regulation exactly, and what is the incremental cost of that?
So what is the extra data that needs to be disclosed? Well, first of all, as mentioned before, in January 2022, there will be further requirements when it comes to the disclosure regulation. And so it's, first of all, much more detailed on what needs to be disclosed, both actually on entity level, and product level website disclosure and prospectus product disclosure. And so it's generally, I would say, on this, just more detailed compared to what's already out there. And then adding up to this, there will be further requirements on disclosing specific sustainability indicators that have been outlined by the EU. So currently there are 14 new indicators that every asset managers must disclose. And already now, policies must be uploaded in terms of what are the policies in terms of due diligence and processes on collecting this data, but also disclosing this data. I hope this answered the question.
Next, do you think SFDR and the EU Taxonomy will help ESG ratings to converge?
I definitely think so, because it is mandatory. So this means that also not only financial market participants, but also companies in the EU must disclose against, for instance, the EU taxonomy. And so with this new information, there's much more data out there to actually label or give information about the level of sustainability of different companies, but also then products and funds in the financial market. So I definitely think this will have an impact. It will become very interesting once the EU taxonomy comes into force. I mean, it's already into force, but when the disclosure must happen next year, it will be very interesting to see how the market actually reacts to this, and also then how ESG rating companies take this into account in their services.
Great. Next, I've heard of Article 8 and 9, but are there sort of shades of gray in between where people could adhere to, Article 8.5 or something like that?
Yeah, it's something that we've started to see a bit. I mean, from a regulatory point of view, there are really only these two categories when it comes to sustainability. There's of course also the Article 6, which has nothing to do with sustainability, but there are now funds that say, yeah, we are an Article 8 plus or something category or article. This is definitely not kind of in line with the regulation, and so I would say please don't listen to that. I mean, either it's Article 8 or Article 9. Yeah, but so we'll also see actually now with the disclosure of the EU taxonomy, yeah, whether this will be kind of a bit less outlined, yeah, in the future.
And I think we've got one final question here we can take, which is very relevant for us as well. What are the implications of the SFDR and the EU taxonomy for emerging market investments? Do you see it limiting capital deployment for fund managers?
Yeah, so as already outlined before, I see that the EU taxonomy and the sustainable finance disclosure regulation is difficult to implement for financial market participants that invest outside of EU, because since the EU taxonomy and the EU regulation generally is very EU focused, which means that it's difficult to apply directly for countries or investments that are not in the EU. So, and kind of a disadvantage of this regulation and this whole framework is that it might be less attractive to actually invest in emerging markets with this. I mean, it's not impossible, but it just takes a little bit more work. And so, yeah, that's very unfortunate. But yeah, it has to be done, especially for investors located in the EU and have EU investors, and also just generally to show that, yes, we do, for instance, us in responsibility, we do sustainable investments.
Great. All right. We'll wrap it up there then. If we didn't get to your question, someone will try and email you with a response later. Otherwise, follow us on LinkedIn for all of our webinars, and wishing you all a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.